I am very excited for today's episode. We have someone who's been in deep Yu-Gi-Oh trouble lately. His name is it X-Saber Uruz? Is that how you pronounce the name?
Yeah, it's just like the 5Ds card, Xiberius,
That's awesome. Uh,
which
so
goes to show I'm not a total Yugi boomer.
that's been your nickname lately, man. I think
I know.
you've gotten a lot of these videos have gone viral. It's been pretty insane. We talked about it off camera. But before we get into that, introduce yourself to the people, man. Who are you? What do you love about Yu-Gi-Oh? What got you into the game? Things like that.
Yeah, so you can just call me Uruz. That's the name of the channel. I got started with Yu-Gi-Oh since I was 8 or 9 years old. Playground Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day. I played it my entire life with a few breaks here and there. I still play the current game, mostly through Master Duel for the most part. I'd say that the peak of when I really competed and actually went to local state championships and stuff like that was during Edison era. That was probably the peak of my competitiveness with Yu-Gi-Oh. And yeah, after that, mostly Master Duel more recently. That's kind of it, yeah. And I suddenly can't hear you guys.
Sorry about
There you go.
that. Yeah. So that's really cool, man. I think me and Jordan got started like way back in high school. We're not too much. We're probably similar ages. We got started when back in 2014, maybe.
It's 2013 because we came into high because we were in a sophomore year. We probably just knew about Yu-Gi-Oh and maybe had a couple cards as kids, and then we really got into it in 2013, and then.
So a little after Edison.
Is it after Edison? Yeah, I think 2013 was like Dragon Ruler format, I want to say. I
Okay.
think so.
I don't know.
Because I think, wasn't Edison like 20, is it 2011 or 2010?
2010, 2011.
Yeah, so yeah, kind of, yeah, a little bit after. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. So I mean, so why do you continue to? I know you don't. You don't play IRL, the TCG too much. I mean, why do you continue to play the game? Do you, even though with some of your grievances?
Yeah, I mean, the game is not awful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the worst TCG. There's a big nostalgia component on it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I completely and utterly hate the game. It's just that I probably have a lot of baggage because I remember what it used to be like. I used to play, I got more serious probably around the GX era, and I competed during the 5Ds era around Edison, right? So I did play also the playground. So, I mean, it's something I've always done, so I've always continued doing it. A lot of people have told me, why don't you just move on if you don't like the game or whatever? It's not that I don't like it. It's just that I know what it used to be like, and, I miss it type of thing.
Right. Yeah, that all makes sense. I mean, how do you feel about all the virality that you've gotten off this topic?
It's, it's interesting. It wasn't planned. The first Yu-Gi-Oh video that I did that got very popular was discussing the artwork changes, which basically was just me going on a rant just about I'm just sick of the way the game looks like. I just think it looks so stupid right now. And with exceptions, but that was the first Yu-Gi-Oh video that I did that got really popular, and there was just an audience that kept not demanding, but asking for more of it. And I just if people want to hear about what I have to say, I don't mind saying it.
Yeah, definitely. It's the artwork has definitely changed.
That was the first video I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I found him.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah. We were just in the
Oh,
car.
so you guys watched that?
Yeah.
I thought you guys found out about the reboot video only. Okay, cool.
No, yeah. That was the first. Yeah, that was the first video I saw because I told my brother before. It's like, hey, why are psychic monsters, plant monsters, even fiends? Why are they all girls? And I saw your video. I'm like, finally, someone is like talking about it. Like, and it was just, I just thought it was like real interesting. I pretty much did agree with like almost everything you said in that video.
Yeah, my big thing is Yu-Gi-Oh! I know it was always an anime, but it had a very specific art style to it that I thought was very cool. And I don't hate anime or anything like that. If you look at my channel, a big chunk of it is anime. I don't have a problem with it. It's just that, to me, that's not what Yu-Gi-Oh! Was and was cool about it. Now it just looks generic, for lack of a better word. Like, a lot of times, depending on what decks are playing, it just looks like Vanguard or something.
Yeah, that's definitely it. Yeah, you had some questions about that, right? Or
Yeah. The big thing is you talked about basically like the aesthetic of the game, right? How you
Yeah.
said like
I like the aesthetics.
and like I remember you said, I forgot which video you said, but you said basically when you would play Yu-Gi-Oh, you felt like you were actually like you had these tablets that you used to summon monsters, right? And back in the DM era, the aesthetic was very, I guess, dark, fiendish, demonic, that type of vibe. Is that
Yeah, not everything, but that's fair. Like, some of those cards are not like fiends and demons, but
right.
the game just had a more mature tone to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It wasn't a waifu battle simulator yet.
right. I was just about to say that had me cracking up. But I think that's the and obviously I don't mind that. I like that vibe too. But I think what I disagree with is I think that was just like I would look at it as one part of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Because I think having different vibes and different aesthetics is what makes Yu-Gi-Oh what's part of what makes Yu-Gi-Oh like the best card game, right? Like having all the the ancient Egyptian type of vibe that the DM area brung was just because the main character or at least the driving character was from ancient Egypt, right? But I think moving on, where we get like superheroes, toys, cooking, circus. I think Yu-Gi-Oh has something for everyone, just like that, and that comes from players slash I guess the characters also.
Who doesn't love the Ojama cards, man?
I don't like the Ojama cards. Those disgust
I don't
me.
either.
But like,
am I the lone wolf here?
Yes.
Am I the only reasonable person?
Yes.
But they are iconic.
But the point is, I do think. I guess I don't necessarily. This might be just because we came in, I guess, a little bit later on. But I guess I just don't necessarily agree with like that. I know you didn't say that's how it should be, but I do think having all these different themes and aesthetics in Yu-Gi-Oh is like a good thing. Besides, all the like anime girls.
You're saying it makes it more appealing to a wider.
Yeah, I think it makes it more appealing. I think that is what makes it appealing.
Oh, gotcha. So what do you think?
So what do you think? What do you think about archetypes like Fluwanderies or Pirelli?
Yeah. I personally love I don't know how to say it. I say purely, but I personally love the purely archetype. I'm not necessarily like a cat.
You
a
played
cat
both
person.
those decks, right?
Yeah, I did play both of those decks. I'm not necessarily like a cat person or like like an animal person, but I do think it's like, hey, like an archetype based off birds. I think that's cool. An archetype having like a little cat, I guess, going around making memories. I just think those are still appealing for the game. If I'm a person who just likes birds, that's a deck for me. But if I am a person who does like ancient Egypt, or ghouls or whatever, or zombies. There's something for me there too.
Yeah, so I can see that, and a lot of people feel that way. It's like you're not definitely not alone on that. My thing though is with that is it made the game look a little bit incoherent, and I think that a lot of those themes to me are infantile, which Yu-Gi-Oh was never that was never the case with the original game. Like I know that everybody likes what they like, and that's fine, but that was just my general feeling is that you have like mechs battling puppies, battling birds, battling waifus, and I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? So it's to an outs. It's never been like that. I don't get it because I grew up with the game and I continue to play it, so I get it. My arguments have always been from an outsider looking in, it looks kind of stupid, possibly.
Right.
And
Right.
ultimately,
Yeah,
that and all the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, my argument with all my videos is never just like my personal opinion of how I want the game to be. I'm always thinking of like, how can I grow? How can we grow the game? How can it go back to being super popular? And I think that the art was one of the things where like, okay, if I wasn't familiar with the IP and I looked at it for the first time, I'd be like, all right, this looks stupid. I'm not going to play it.
Yeah, I can get that. Yeah, I understand that. I guess I would feel like I don't know, because I forgot what it was like, because I saw people playing in the library, right? Oh, I guess because I was a little bit, I knew about Yu-Gi-Oh, but if I didn't know about it at all, I can understand that because when we got back into it, I think I just saw people playing in the library. I think I saw, what was it? I want to say I saw somebody playing Six Samurais, and the other person was playing spell books. And I had no idea what those cards were, and I guess I didn't think about that. And I guess I would just think like someone else would just think the same way, like, oh, they're playing Yu-Gi-Oh and they're playing with like unique cards versus. And I get it; it's not necessarily like familiar. When I look at a game of Pokemon, it doesn't matter like who the Pokemon are. I know those are Pokemon, and I know. The game, it looks like Pokemon.
Right.
And I think you did, I think you did mention something like, oh, this doesn't look like Yu-Gi-Oh. It's not necessarily recognizable, at least to the original game. And every other card game is pretty much like that.
So do you want?
Yeah,
so,
and that's not exclusive to Yu-Gi-Oh. Like Magic's having a problem with that. Like, why is My Little Pony on Magic right now? You know what I mean? Like,
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
okay. I think, I talked to my brother about that. I don't know if it's.
like who are we trying to
I
appeal
think
to?
it's more for Magic. I think it's more of a, I guess, a collab type thing because they do have. I didn't know they had My Little Pony, but yeah, they got like My Little Pony. They have Doctor Who. I think they're bringing in WWE.
You don't want to see
Oh,
John
what the
Cena
hell?
fight dragons, dude? I want to
Yeah,
see
you
My
know what I
Little
mean?
Pony
It's
versus
just
John
like-
Cena.
It's just not artistically coherent. That's my biggest gripe.
I could agree with that.
Gotcha. So do you think Yu-Gi-Oh needs to start making that kind of artwork again? Just kind of that, like, kind of.
A little bit more mature.
Yeah.
I think so, man, and I think that a lot of it is like thirst trap. A lot of it is like
I agree
lolly
with
bait.
that.
And there's art like why does trap tricks exist?
I like trap tricks.
Okay, yeah, but that has been a big thing online, especially when the structure deck came out. It's like, hey, and I said that to my brother too. It's like they're supposed to be insects, plants, and I forgot what was the third one, but basically insects and plants, and they're all just like a bunch of chibi girls, like basically, which is
Or
weird.
Madolchi.
Yeah.
Madolche.
Shout out to
yeah.
Gerald.
Shout out to Gerald. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I can see that because it's kind of this is kind of get into general society too, but how a lot of society nowadays, a lot of parts of society are like kind of sexualized, and I guess that's gotten into Yu-Gi-Oh as well. I know here on the TCG we censor a lot of that stuff, but
Right.
still though, it's clearly you know what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's why they got feet Ash Blossom.
Yeah, there we go again. That's what I mean.
What's feet Ash? Oh,
Ash Blossom has an alternative
the-
artwork, whereas like her feet are like in like the, I guess, forefront of the picture. And like, I mean, that's obviously wasn't their intention, but people do think like, hey, that's weird.
Yeah, that's fair. So do you guys think it's like they're doing this type of artwork because they think it'll attract more people to the game and
Yeah,
a little bit of a weird way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do agree with them on it. Does make they are doing it to make it more, I guess, appealing to like the general public. You know, they're making all these archetypes that are just like anime, the anime art style, right? Even, you know, even like decks that are supposed to be plants or insects or fiends, they're like anime girls, right?
Yeah, what do you think about that, Ruse?
Yeah, I don't know that they're appealing to the general public with that. I think they're appealing to a very specific niche of people that are in Japan, that are in that. And it happens that some people in other countries are also into that, and that's fine. But I don't think it appeals to the larger audience.
Yeah, my brother showed
And again,
me,
I think it kind of makes it look dumb. Just my opinion.
yeah, my brother was showing me a bunch of these new archetypes. I guess with Trap Tricks and Melodious, and it is a bunch of like, I guess female archetypes with, you know, that seem to be overly sexualized. It's really weird stuff.
But I think
And that's not to say that the OG game didn't have some cards that were sexualized, right?
right.
You can think of like the Dark Magician Girl. Some people bring up the Harpy Lady. Some people bring up the like Mystic Elf. So there was always a little bit of that, but they were monsters for the most part. Except Dark Magician. That was very obvious what they were trying to do. I didn't like him. I didn't like her then, and I don't like her now, right? So it's more of like, you know, yeah, okay, you can sexualize the Harpy Ladies, but they're monsters. They fit the theme. And you might say that, okay, well, not everything has to be a monster. Like, I think the example I heard in your podcast you brought, which we'll get into that, like the other eras, but you brought up like the scrap monsters, like Junk Synchron, some Scrap Dragon, and all that. That I think fits the original theme. So it's not to say that anything past Duel Monster sucks. There's a lot of cool stuff still there. It's just that a lot of it really sucks also.
Okay, all right. Do you think like any of it belongs in the game? Like the Centurion archetype or the what's another one? I guess, you know, we had Dark Magician Girl. You know, there's a whole Magician Girl archetype. Do you think any of that is like appropriate for the game?
It's not that's appropriate or not. Like, I'm not the holder of truth. I'm not the police. Like, it's just my opinion that no.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Yeah, what else? I mean, so, I guess other things you brought up were, what else questions did you have? Yeah, another question on there.
Yeah, the regarding the reboot you suggested.
Okay.
I think the first thing you said was getting rid of the other summoning methods.
Yeah, that wasn't super popular, huh?
Yeah, me personally.
that is a hot take. When I heard, I think when I first heard, I'm like, that's a hot take.
Yeah, I was watching it and I yelled to my brother. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I can explain like the reasoning behind that. So
Yeah, definitely. I think I guess well I get what I felt about it is that the game needs to continue to evolve in a way, and I think the other summoning methods help do that. And I think you might have saw we mentioned it on the podcast, but you know, each of them have, you know, a very specific purpose. Like what the synchros, they make small monsters relevant to the game. The Xyz, they're pretty much like a toolbox for us, right? And then, you know,
Right.
I mean, we've always had fusions, right? I mean, you know, fusions are more specific to monsters and decks. But I think you mentioned a game you played. What was it? It's called
Flesh and Blood.
Flesh and Blood. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that game's been. It's not that old, right? What, like 4 or 5 years old, or something like that.
Yeah, it's fairly new.
Yeah, fairly new. And I think, well, I don't know. Okay, I honestly I don't know what other games have done, but I think other games have. They've got new types of monsters. I imagine. But if you could further go into that point of why you think we need to get rid of these other summoning methods.
Yeah, so the main thing with that, what I'll say, the whole point with this video, it was never. I can hear my own voice. Sorry, it's a little distracting.
Oh, you're good.
There you go. Yeah, so the whole point with that idea of the reboot, the people that have been subbed to my channel, watch on my videos, I think they know where I was going with that, but I didn't do the best job of explaining, I guess, every single in and out of it. It was more throwing the idea out there. I actually plan on rebooting the video. See what I did there? I'm planning on rebooting the video and actually going into more detail about all that, right? But the thing for me is that idea of a reboot is not my ideal Yu-Gi-Oh! If I had it, because people are saying, oh, you just want it your way or the highway, right? This is like, you're only thinking about yourself. That is not my ideal Yu-Gi-Oh! My ideal Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like Edison Expanded. That's what I play the most. So I very much love the 5Ds era. I like synchros. I think that they add a lot to the game. But with the reboot and that video, I had a very specific like objective in mind. And the idea with that was, well, what would accomplish the goal of bringing the most returning players back to the game and made the game the most recognizable as possible to the largest audience possible, while also trying to bring in the most new players and hopefully retaining as much players as you can, right? So it's not that I have this inherent problem with synchros or anything after, because again, name of my channel is not Yugi in the Dark Magician. It's Ex-Saber-Uruz, which is a very 5D's thing. That's the deck I played. I played that in Six Samurais. So I love those archetypes. I think the Red Dragon Archfiend, Stardust Dragon, especially like Junk Warrior. I love that card. So the goal with the reboot, I was trying to be very objective oriented with it. And my big thing was also, we can get into the reboot of the anime. I just think that it's very important that if you're going to reboot the anime and make like the Yugi and the Dark Magician and Kaiba and the Blue Eyes, and then they're welcomed by Snake Eye, it doesn't make any fucking sense to me. You know what I mean? It's just, what's the point of using the bait and then bringing them back to a game that's completely unrecognizable? Versus if you have a game that might be a lot different in the sense that's a little faster, there's more effects than what they remember, but it's more in line with what they used to play, then I think it's a good use of that strategy. So most of my videos, and especially that video, it's not like what I want for myself, because I can think of the different and ideal game for different niches of people. That was like, how can I appeal to the broadest audience possible and have the game not have the Master Duel effect? Like if we reboot the game, I think it would have a similar effect to Master Duel, where all these returning players come back to the game. Okay, well now it's Fiendsmith and Snake Eye and whatever else. This is not what I remember. We're looking at Omni Negates, 20-minute solitaire turns, unbreakable boards, victory on turn 1. This is not what I remember. I'm leaving. So that's pointless. So the idea would be to reboot the anime, to bring people back, and then welcome them with a game that's more familiar to what they remember. That was the objective of the video.
Good.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, I can see that. Do you think if you, in terms of like rebooting the anime, right? Do you think if the anime is rebooted that they could bring in like the newer support cards, like the newer support cards that came from, that's basically based on the original monsters from the DM era, like Blue Eyes has a Synchro monster, Red Eyes and Dark Magician. They have new fusion and Xyz monsters, etc. Do you think if they bring that back into the like a reboot of the anime, then it would make more sense to still have the other summoning methods. I mean, Pendulum is like a whole different story, in my opinion. But, if everyone from the DM era had their new support cards, do you think it would still make sense to have the newer summoning methods in this hypothetical reboot?
I think that, so number one, aesthetically it would make sense, and I think it would add to things also, right? I don't have a problem with the cards itself. The main thing though is I would basically turn those cards into fusions or rituals. And the only reason for that, it's not because I prefer that, it's because that is what's most recognizable for most people, right? And then you might say, oh, nobody used to use rituals, nobody used to use fusions, right? My idea would to also be rework how polymerization works and rework the actual spell rituals as well, and there be an element of deck search there. That would be the idea. And I'm not saying that that's like the ideal, most optimal thing to do. It's just that I think it makes it more recognizable, because a lot of people I know, they're like, when did you quit playing? Oh, when they came out with the blue cards, when they came out with the white cards. I just don't recognize the game anymore. That's like a wall for a lot of people.
Gotcha. So you think it's just become unfamiliar for people now?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, they gravitate to things that they're familiar to. That's the idea. Again, I don't have a problem with Synchros. That's my favorite era. But my thought is like, what's the most recognizable game for the most people type of thing? And I'd rather rework the cards than change any rules. Because a big suggestion people had was like, okay, add the rituals to the extra deck, right? And that sounds great. That's a great idea, actually. But I don't want to touch the rules, which is like what Rush Duels did, which is why I think it failed, because it's not real Yu-Gi-Oh!
I think that's a fair take. It's fair. So, I mean, how do you in this reboot of the game? How do you keep it evolving, right? Because eventually, not even just to keep people interested. Eventually, we're going to, we're going to age, we're going to age out, right? Now that it might
Right.
take a while, because I guess we're pretty old now. Well, not old, but you know what I mean. But yeah, how do you keep the game interesting? How do you keep it fresh?
Yeah, so one thing, I from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys brought, okay, he talked a lot about rebooting the Duel Monsters cards. But is it just going to be that? Like, we got to have more cards. We can't just keep using the same cards, right? So I didn't explain this, but the idea would be to build on the Duel Monsters era and add more cards that are in line in the same vein of that era. Now, there are cards that are very iconic from other eras as well that I do think, like I gave you some examples, like Stardust Dragon, Junk Warrior, the Scrap Monsters. A lot of those, they fit the aesthetic, and they are very iconic in their own right. So I do think there is a lot of merit in reintroducing those into the game for the same reason. I just wouldn't make them synchros. I just wouldn't make them like a link card. You know what I mean? That would be the idea. And obviously, expanding on the game. And then we get into another debate of like, okay, well, what does the progression of the game look like? Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have a rotation model. So, which is a separate topic, and there's a lot of schools of thought when it comes to this. So, in the ideal world, my opinion would be that Yu-Gi-Oh! Should adopt a very horizontal growth model, meaning the sales for the cards come from the diversity of new printed cards in different options of play versus just new sets that completely overpower the previous sets and essentially replace them. Which we say we don't have rotation for Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, but we kind of do. Every new Tier 0 deck that comes out, there's your rotation right there. Every ban list that comes out, that's a form of rotation as well. So people don't call it that, but to me it's essentially the same thing, but it makes it worse because it makes the company constantly have to overpower previous sets, and it forces the company to make the game crazier and crazier, and there's no ceiling. And we're in an interesting spot right now where I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has reached a plateau where do you go from here, right? Because the game already ends on turn 0 or turn 1. You already have Omni Negates. You already have Unbreakable Boards. You already have 20-step combos. Like, what's the next thing, right? I don't know how the game gets crazier than it is now. So the idea would be to put some sort of cap. Now, that might be a little bit, that's the idealistic thing for me, right? versus the extremely aggressive vertical model that they have going on right now of just like, it screams to me just like corporate greed and quarterly profits. Like, fuck all your deck from last season. We're just making new decks, and if you throw it away, if you want to be relevant, you gotta buy Tier Limits. Then you gotta buy Kashtira. Then you gotta buy Snake Eye. It's always like, it's happening now so fast also that cards don't have time to become iconic. They don't have time to marinate. I think that the reason why X-Saber, Six Samurai, all those archetypes from that time are so iconic is because they had a little more time to marinate. So I think that's a big component there too. The other school of thought is adding actual proper rotation to the game. And then you might say, okay, well, what's the point of rebooting dual monsters and then in next year we rotate them out? The idea would be that some cards don't rotate and some of them do. Now, what's the right or the wrong way to do that? I don't know. It's just, I'm just kind of saying those are different schools of thought.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Yeah, I mean, the corporate greed thing I think people resonate with because the cards are insanely expensive. I think we just talked about.
And then there's that, yeah.
The new Multra that's coming out. What you think that's going to be $100, right, Jordan? A piece?
Well, the one the one is out. The newer one, that's already like $130 price tag each.
That's out right now?
Yeah, it came out in Rota.
Oh, that's insane. Yeah, that's pretty
insane. $130 each.
Yeah. And then the point about rotation is very interesting. I guess I never really thought about Yu-Gi-Oh in that way. How the fact that we don't have rotation could be a big reason why we get this insane decks, right? When I first got back to the game, and last year during Kashtira format, I thought Kashtira was insane. I'm like, wait, you get to just looking at my deck for free? I was like, this is crazy. And I got like little trap tricks. Anyway, and so yeah, I definitely think that's an interesting point to make. Another thought about that, but you got anything to? What do you think about that, Jordan?
No, yeah. I pretty much. I understand everything you're saying. I think I pretty much agree with it for the most part, especially with like our constant changing meta and the power of cards. You know, we have these. They're
gonna make the match winners legal next. That's how you really cap the game.
I'm gonna still play, but this.
You can still play.
Yeah, but it seems like we have. We gotta make these cards more powerful, and then we make cards to counter those more powerful cards, and then we gotta make those cards more powerful to counter the counters.
That's a great point. Right. It's like they create the problem to sell the solution.
Right, exactly. And it's just like you said, it's like an endless cycle, and we're reaching a ceiling.
I was thinking. Yeah, I guess I was. I think I was thinking about that in the original podcast we were doing, that you were setting a cap to the game, but I guess I do see your point that, I mean, we're kind of are at if we're close, if not already at a cap, right? And it's a high cap, it's a high bar that we're at right now, and I guess is your argument that maybe that cap should be a little bit lower, like a little bit more.
A lot lower.
A lot lower. Okay.
Because I think if you think about it, right? Where does the game go from here at this point, right? Like I said, we have Omni Negates, we have turn 1 boards, we have Unbreakable boards, 20-step combos. So what's the only thing that's kind of deciding games right now? It's not really like a back and forth of attack. Like, I ended up chipping away at your life points faster than you did at mine. It's basically hand management. It basically comes down to you run out of cards or you run out of answers, right? So it becomes, okay, I max C or Ash Blossom this, I Baron this, and yada yada. And when you're out of answers, I basically win. The next step to me, logically, in that train of thought, is that every time a negate happens or a summon happens, you draw a card. So there will no longer be like a concept of a turn. Everything happens in the same turn, and that's how they would keep the back and forth going. I'm not saying that's what I want. That sounds horrible. But if I were to imagine where we go from here, it's either that or a very harsh change to the master rule. Because you have all these decks that already recycle each other, right? That's another problem. Every deck now, to be relevant, needs a mathmech circular, Like every deck needs multiple engine starters, and they're hyper consistent, right? And they're like a deck like Labyrinth. It's constantly recycling itself, right? So like, where do we go from here? Every deck already does everything to the point they look the same, like as the way they play.
Yeah, yeah. I think I had a complaint about that like months ago when with Super Heavy Samurai. What's the point of playing Super Heavy Samurai if they're just building if it's like it's building the same big boards with like five negates. I think I don't think I played during we didn't play during I guess what they call COVID Yu-Gi-Oh, and I guess the whole Helki Fibrax debacle. You know, everybody was just using different methods to get the same.
That's a great point too. Everything ends in the same board. That synchros kind of do that in a way, and the way to fix that but still allow for synchros, in my opinions, is make synchros like Junk Warrior or like I think Turbo Warrior is the name. Synchros that require specific tuners to make that monster versus making it okay. These two random monsters can just make Barone. I don't think that that's good because it all ends up in like Chaos Angel and Barone the floor.
Exactly. Yeah, we've definitely talked about that before.
Yeah, I have noticed. Yeah, yeah. It seems like the new like this format. Everyone's using. What's
What,
the engine called now?
Azamita?
No, the eyes one. The
Snake Eyes?
Snake Eyes. Yeah. And
That's where I took a
strategies
break right there.
revolve
Snake
around
Eyes.
that card. Which I guess I mean it's pretty toxic. But I guess I mean that's kind of been a thing for a while, right? I mean that was back in Zoo. A lot of decks use that as an engine, and but I guess before that you don't really notice it. But anyway, yeah. So it sounds like to me you want to do a complete overhaul of the game, right? You want to cut out these new summoning methods. You want to reboot the anime because I know you wanted to kind of line up the anime with Yu-Gi-Oh IRL. Like if a kid watches,
to an extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But generally, if a kid watches the show, they have like a very basic knowledge of how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Absolutely, and not just the basic knowledge of how to play the game. Having the cards that they're playing match. I know that for me as a little kid, like again, you guys weren't kids when you got into Yu-Gi-Oh, which nothing wrong with that, but most of my friends and I got into Yu-Gi-Oh because it was like, oh shit, there's Jinzo on the screen. I have Jinzo. Oh, the Dark Magician. I have the Dark Magician. I think it's very important for kids to get into the game that what they're holding matches what they see on the screen. It's not important for me and you because like I'm pushing 30. Like I don't care. But for kids, and when I'm thinking of the specific goal of bringing in new blood to the game, which it doesn't get a lot of, that's a big problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not getting new blood. I think that that's a huge component. The second big component is making it so it doesn't feel like you need a PhD to learn how to play the game, you know? The only reason I know how to play the game is because I've evolved with it. But when I've tried to introduce new people to the game, it's almost like I'm baiting them because I start with Duel Monster stuff, they get it. We get to the GX stuff, the fusions and elemental heroes and all that, they're kind of getting it. Then you get to the 5Ds, they're like, okay, you're starting to lose me, but I still get it. Then you get to Links, Pendulums, XYZs, they're like, all right, I don't get it.
Yeah, I definitely like to see. Con would never release those numbers, but I definitely like to see those numbers, see how many new people get into the game each year, because you keep seeing like Yu-Gi-Oh's dying, right? But is Yu-Gi-Oh dying in a way that a lot of players are leaving the game, but there's still tournaments are still pretty huge. So is it that like new people keep getting to the game, or is it that the same people keep coming to the tournaments? Right?
I think it's a lot of the same. Like there's always a little bit of people that will come in, but I think it's also losing people, and I think that Yu-Gi-Oh essentially has become a game for a minority of hyper competitive players. I think that player base will mostly always still be there, but it doesn't have a casual or somewhere in between scene like something like Pokemon has, like something like Magic has, like Yu-Gi-Oh now. We like to call each other casual, like that's a common insult in Yu-Gi-Oh, but I've never met a current casual Yu-Gi-Oh player. Like the standard of a casual player for Yu-Gi-Oh is a very experienced player in pretty much any other card game, right? So I think that that's a big problem because a game will not survive only a competitive scene. And I think that the game will always exist in some capacity. My fear, and people like to say, oh, you just want to see Yu-Gi-Oh die because you hate it. No, man, I fucking played the game. I'm playing like a Mathmech Cyberpile deck yesterday. I played the game, right? My fear is that it will be ended on the West, so the TCG will end and it'll become a Japan only thing. That's my fear.
Mike's muting. Go ahead.
So regarding what you said about the whole tournament scene, I think I heard from Team APS that like we're hitting like records in like tournament scenes is because like people who grew up with the game, they have adult money now, right? Like so
Yeah.
so that's why we're seeing like people who've been it's basically people who've been playing the game going to these tournaments now, and we're not getting any newer players, and going back to what
And returning players.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And then going back to what Uru said about the how we don't have like in between scene between like I guess casuals and competitive players. I was do you think we should have like let's say I guess a different type of format like with Magic I just learned this last year like it's what they call I think what they call it they have standard and they have
They just have what? They have like 3 different formats.
there's like different formats I think but there's like the standard format and then there's the format I think where every card they play at 1. I forgot what the format's called, but that's basically the most popular format, right? And I just found that interesting.
Like Commander.
Commander, yeah, thank you. Commander format where every card's at 1, and that's the most popular. And I just thought, why can't we should probably have something like that for Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's just like a different type of format for returning players or newer players. Or even less competitive players.
Do you have like what they play those forms? Do they have actual like large tournaments for those formats, or is it just it's kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh where we have like
Commander's huge.
Commander's huge?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Because we have obviously we have the different formats, but it's more like side events and more local scenes. So what do you guys think we should have that for large tournaments like?
Yeah, but not just like not just legacy formats, just like an alternative format. Like I'm not sure like how it would be done, but we could have something like that for Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm not like I don't know about every card in 1, or I guess kind of what do they call it? Like a cube type thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they would do it, but again, I think that would be better for like players to gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What do you think about that, Ruse?
Yeah, so a big thing that people brought up, which people missed the point of the video, and that's not all on them. I didn't people complain my videos are too long, so I was trying to get straight to the point, right? So in doing that, unfortunately, you don't address everything, right? But ideally, this reboot, quote unquote, would run parallel to the current format. That would be the ideal thing. If I was thinking about the most effective thing that's going to get the most people back, it would be to actually replace it. Because then the word gets out, Yu-Gi-Oh got rebooted, it's not the same game, you can come back and play actual Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is the one format. But that's not fair. Not only do I think that that's not fair, I think it's going to alienate a big portion of the player base. But if I'm being objective, that's what I would do. If I'm using my heart or, thinking about everyone, it would run parallel to the actual current meta. But even if you were to reboot the game and replace it, that doesn't stop, nobody's stopping me from playing Goat and Edison. Nobody's stopping you from playing any other format. The problem, though, is with that is there's a reason why Konami doesn't promote those formats. There's a reason they're not in Master Duel, because those are Edison and Goat are closed formats. So what does that mean? They can't make money on it. They can do reprints of different artwork and stuff, but they can't make new cards for those formats. And that's a problem because I'll be the first to admit, Edison is my favorite, but it gets boring because there's nothing new coming out for it, right? So it has to be done in such a way where it allows for new product to be printed. There's some sort of ongoing either rotation or expansion of the game. That's important. Whether it should replace the main format or not and get rid of it altogether, whether it should run parallel, I don't know. I think the best solution is for it to run parallel, is my opinion. But people were saying, like, oh, you just want to do things the way that you want to do on that reboot video. And you're not thinking about the people that, like Goat, they like Edison, they like the corn format. And it's like, when did I say I was the police and you're no longer allowed to play those formats? You can keep playing them. I'm just saying that maybe the current game shouldn't be the face of the game because that's the first thing that people see. And dude, have you seen, like, if you look at a competitive game, there's so much deck search. There's so much going on the board. It just looks insane for an outsider looking in. Like, if I saw that and I didn't know what's going on, I would gravitate to something like Flesh and Blood that not only looks cool, it's artistically coherent, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot simpler. Because another thing is the text on the cards. Like, we can go into that now. Why does every Yu-Gi-Oh card have to have a wall of text? Well, because they don't have something like Pokemon does, where they have one-line effects that apply to every single thing. Like, it doesn't matter what Pokemon you're using. If he applies paralysis, paralysis is paralysis. If he applies burn, burn is burn. Same thing with Flesh and Blood. The combo, the go again, same mechanics. Like, most games realize that this is the way to go. But for some reason with Yu-Gi-Oh, it's a wall of text in every single card. And you might even say, okay, but that's, newer players, we kind of get it. Man, I took a small break from this game. And maybe I just have a pea-brain memory, but I quit, it took a break right when the Snake Eye format started. Like, I played a little bit of that. I'm like, all right, this is not for me. I got back into it 3 days ago with the same deck, the same Mathmech Cyber Spile deck that I was playing. I had to, relearn how those cards, I got the general idea of it, but I'm sitting there, why am I spending 2 hours relearning the deck that I knew how to play 3 months ago? Because there's just that much to remember. It's almost like this, you have, dude, I have work to think about. I have, my family, I have, I'm thinking about other things. So it's just so demanding for the average person. And I talk a lot about the little Timmys and the 40-year-old electrician Toms. Like, for me and you, and maybe more you guys even than me, we're in the current game, so we're evolving with it as it goes. So it's not that foreign to us, like how it works. And we know the meta. We don't have to read every single card. But, dude, for an electrician that's coming home after a 9 to 5 or something, getting home, sitting down, and having to read every single card of the current meta to just be able to play and people not get pissed off at him. Not even to compete, just to go to locals and, not piss someone off. You can't sit there and read every card for 2 hours. And then you throw little Timmy in the mix. Dude, little Timmy would have a seizure trying to learn current Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think when I think I felt the same way, and I just played Trap Tricks last year. And Trap Tricks is, I guess, relatively simpler. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Even when going from, I think I stopped, when was it? Right when it was sometime when prank kids became a thing, and then I got back into it right at the end of tournament format, and then I'm just and it did feel like a little bit of a different game. I had to relearn certain interactions, and I'm just like, why does before I would throw 2-3 hand traps at you, and that would that would pretty much stop you, and now I'm throwing every interruption I have at you, and you keep going. You still made almost a full board, and now. And every card having a line of text, I do definitely agree with it. It's like,
what happened to draw 2 cards? What happened?
Right. It's almost like you're just you have to learn the game by reading the cards. Mm-hmm. That's instead of having just universal rules and things like that, right? And
I think you're I see your point in running parallel formats. I think that's a very interesting idea that no one's really thought about. That these formats if these formats come out with card specific, if Konami comes out with cards specific to these formats, maybe that's a way for them to make money on the game, and I think that's a very interesting thing to think about. I think a lot of people are thinking of the game and your criticisms as how it is right now. They're not really thinking they're not really conceiving this new kind of game you've thought about, which could be the disconnect. Or maybe just people just don't like your opinion either. But
No, I'm sure there's a lot of that.
yeah. So I think these are very interesting like thoughts about, and I think are worth players to and Konami to consider if they want to save the game, if they want to last another 25 years. What do you think, Jordan?
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. You know, I always thought like, what is Konami gonna like start doing, like from now on? Like, we can't just cards are just going to get more and more powerful, and you know, like I've said it before, like Barone is a big example of that. Like having a card with like 3 effects that's easy to summon and a big attack. That's like the epitome of like what the game has become.
Well,
But
are they still kind of, sorry to interrupt you? Do you think they're starting to do that, like slow down? Because you know, with these new archetypes that are coming out, Racial, what's the other one? Malice. You know, the way they play, it's kind of like back in Duelist Alliance, kind of a little bit like that.
I think that's fair. We have to see like where it goes on from there, because those could just be, you know, like I guess anomalies.
Sure.
Just because, you know, there's like it's the new deck, and you know they're bringing down the power, or they're banning the power of the older decks. But also I wanted to get Uruz's thoughts. If in this reboot, I know you did mention in one of your videos that one of the point of the reboots is to like not have so much power creep in the game. Do you think we could still have? Do you think there are cards that are, let's say, I guess, good examples of maybe being more powerful, but still being appropriate for the game, right? Like if we just go to GX era where we just had fusions and rituals, that's what they made fusions more, I guess, more powerful, more accessible, easier to summon, things like that. So do you think there are cards that are still appropriate for that like version of the game,
like room for power creep?
I guess room for power creep.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not. I don't think of it so much as power creep. In my ideal world, that might not be realistic. But again, the video is supposed to be like an ideal world, right? It's not. People are acting like this is some sort of like business proposition for Konami. I'm just throwing an idea out there that might be idealistic. But yeah, there should be some sort of. It's not a progression. I don't think of it as in power creep. I think of in expanding the game, adding new strategies, new way to do different things that don't completely outshine everything. Because let me know if you agree with me. I feel like Konami has a business model right now that rotates in this way. We print out a new set, we let it sell. So we make a new set, it completely overpowers everything that was there before. It's now Tearlaments, now Kashtira, it's now Snake Eye. Everybody buys it. Then we start hitting it and start banning it to the point where then it's no longer that viable anymore, or it's not as good. Then we do the same thing again. Then we start banning it once it sells a lot. Then it's just rinse and repeat. It's clearly like the way that they're doing it, to me, it's so obvious. It makes them look desperate. And I am much more for a progression of different strategies and expanding the game in a way where it doesn't replace old things. Because the whole thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! That makes it appealing is not having a rotation. You can still take like your Yugi starter deck that was never viable, but I'm just saying, theoretically, you can still play those cards currently, right? That's the appeal. But that's a gimmick to me because practically speaking, no, you can't. You're just going to get stomped. So what's the difference between that and actually a proper rotation, right? So I think that if we're going in the spirit of maintaining what Yu-Gi-Oh! Wants to be, which is this ever-evolving game, I think that there has to be a hard cap on power creep. I think that has to be reevaluated on how they do it. Otherwise, we're just going to get to the same point that we're at right now. Like, what's the point of rebooting the game if we do the same thing and we get to the same point, right? So,
do you think cards like what we call hand traps and like Kashtira Fenrir, right? In my opinion, Kashtira Fenrir is like a pretty decent card, right? It's almost like Cyber Dragon. You just spell summon it, and then you get an interruption out of it, and then it replaces itself. Do you think cards like that would still be good for the game?
So, if a card like that were to be introduced, I think that there has to be, or just even Cyber Dragon, I think that there has to be some sort of change in the master rule to limit special summons. Like, it's not so much about the cards that are going to get introduced. That's why I was vague with that. It's like, these cards can still be in the game. These things can still be in the game. But if they get introduced, there has to be a fundamental change in the rules. Otherwise, we're just going to come to the same point we're at right now. Right? The whole point is that it's not that Fenrir is a problem. Like, yeah, removing a card faced like his effect is pretty busted. But like a card like Cyber Dragon, the problem isn't so much that he gets to be special summoned per se. The problem is when you have cards that like you get to make 10 special summons in the same turn type of thing. That's more the problem than the one effect itself. I think that there might need to be a change on the master rule. But then we go back to we don't want to touch the rules of the game. So why should that card even exist type of thing? I am much more for special summons being something that a spell causes, like Monster Reborn, Called from the Grave, or Called by the Grave, or Polymerization, deck searches to special summon something from the extra deck. I am much more in line with that, not because it's necessarily better, but because it doesn't change the rules of the game. Because a big thing everybody tells me, it's like, well, Rush Duels already did that. And it wasn't very popular, right? They're already doing Rush Duels. Your idea is basically Rush Duels. Well, everyone that I know, both people that don't like the current game and like the current game, don't want to play Rush Duels because they don't consider that real Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it changes the rules. So I really think that it's important to not change the rules, not only for that familiarity, but so people feel like they're playing the real thing. There's definitely a value to that, I think.
Okay, all right, yeah, yeah, I can definitely resonate with that. I can definitely agree with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's probably. I mean, I'm sure there's good rule changes we can make while still having the game feel like Yu-Gi-Oh. I think this is very it's very valid points he's made. So I mean, why do you think when you say these things, people call you like Yugi Boomer? They're just saying you just want to get back. You just basically want to get back to old Yu-Gi-Oh, man. Like
yeah.
Like you're just a square, Yeah.
I think that, in fairness, most people probably haven't seen most of my videos. Because even if throughout my videos, like, I throw bits of me playing the game. Like, you can very clearly, like, I'm not saying I'm the best or I'm great, but you can obviously tell I know how to play the current game, right? I play, I get pretty high up on the Master Duel rank, when I choose to grind it out and all that. So I know how it works, but I think that most people hear the Duel Monster sentiment thing and they instantly assume that, okay, this is somebody that used to play Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! And never got over it. He never grew up. He doesn't play the modern game. He has no idea how it works. He wasn't part of that progression, and it's just like some boomer that doesn't like anime. That's another one that I get a lot, even though if you look at my channel, half of it is anime. So obviously I don't have a problem with anime itself. It's just Yu-Gi-Oh! Had the zeitgeist and the boom that it had, I believe, for a reason. And especially when it did. And I try to be humble in the fact that maybe I don't even understand all the elements that made that happen. So, but there's clearly one or several elements that made it so popular back in the day and make it less popular now. And you might say, okay, well, that's just progression. People grow out of things, right? Well, Pokemon says otherwise, right? And they kept expanding on the IP. So Pokemon is as popular as it's ever been, right? So, and I think that Yu-Gi-Oh!, the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, had the Pikachu effect. Like a lot of these cards, even crappy cards like Celtic Guardian, that was almost like a Charmander of the game. Like people knew who that was. People know the Blue Eyes. People know Yugi. They know Kaiba. They know Joey. They know the Time Wizard. Like all these like not so great cards, or just the Blue Eyes and the Red Eyes and the Dark Magician. They know these cards. They're so iconic. So I think there is an element of that maybe even I don't fully understand. So I try to be humble about that maybe we need a recapture in order to achieve that again. And for whatever reason, current sets and current cards are not that. There's a reason why the face of Yu-Gi-Oh is still Yu-Gi-Oh and the Dark Magician, right? It's not anything else. The face of the game isn't Snake Eye. It isn't Tearlaments. It's still the Dark Magician. Why? Right? Because it's iconic. So I think that's why people think I'm a boomer, because they're like, you're married to the original IP. And I'm like, look at the fucking name of the channel. It's X Saber Ruse. Like, obviously, I don't hate anything that's past Duel Monsters, but I think that's where a lot of people, when they first hear it, they're so conditioned. That's what my last video has been about. Like, people are very ageist, and they've become very quick at, like, discarding people's opinion without actually hearing them out. And that's not just Yu-Gi-Oh, right? That's not just a Yu-Gi-Oh exclusive thing. I think that as a society, we've lost the basic decency in communication skill of, like, just hearing each other out before we make an assumption. And also the skill of, it's okay to disagree. Like, you don't have to agree with me. You might like the anime stuff. I'm not saying I'm the holder of truth and all the anime sucks and everything now sucks. I might think that, but you don't have to. I'm just sharing my opinion.
Yeah, they're definitely all is all fair. Obviously, we all know it's the internet, and they're going to disagree. They're gonna call you names. They're gonna say some crazy thing. They're gonna just invalidate
Right.
all your opinions because they think they're smarter than everybody.
So if you don't think like me, you're wrong.
Yeah, clearly. That's what I think a lot. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Cool. I thought this is very interesting. What, Jonah? You got another question?
Yeah, just one more question. What do you from what I've watched, you've played different card games, or at least know how to play different card games. What do you think is the best part of those card games that maybe just the best in general, or maybe like something that Yu-Gi-Oh can take from them?
I think I'll use Flesh and Blood as an example again, because that's the most recent one that I've picked up. I picked up Flesh and Blood in 2 hours. Like 1 or 2 hours, I was already playing in an armory, right then and there. That would never happen with Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I would never learn the game the same, like, first hour and be ready to go. I think that Yu-Gi-Oh has a problem where it requires too big of an investment to get in or back into the game. Not just money-wise, that's a separate issue, but mental, right? There's a lot of reading. It's very demanding from somebody that works full-time. And I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody, but for me, like, I don't know, man. Like, I have, 3 dogs. I'm married. I have, I work 50 hours a week. I run a channel on the side. Like, for me to learn a new card game is a lot, right? So if I didn't already know how Yu-Gi-Oh works, I probably would never pick up the game, just because of how it's a big investment, man. For most people, even if they like the game, I've used this example. Like, I have friends that love the current art style. They're not married to the original IP like I am, but what turns them off is like, all right, man, we've been like over the rules for 3 hours. I still don't get it. Like, never mind. I think that's a huge problem.
Yeah. I think I could. Yeah, it is a lot, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just watched a video today trying to learn more about the damage step.
The battle phase, it has to have like the most complicated.
It's the most complicated.
It has like what 6 different steps probably.
There's at least I think you're right the first time, at least 8.
There's like the start phase.
There's the battle step, the start of the damage step, the
damage
calc, during damage calc, after damage calc. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And people, I apologize. I'll just say this too. One big thing that people say they love Yu-Gi-Oh so much about too, I think that, so they say, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh is different and that's what makes it cool, is you got to be really smart to play Yu-Gi-Oh. All these other games, Magic, Flesh and Blood, they're easy to pick up because they're dumb. Yu-Gi-Oh is really smart. You got to be a brainiac to play this game. But the reality is that if you sat down, you just in an hour taught Stephen Hawking and Isaac, Einstein, how to play the game, they would still be just as confused, because you got to do a lot of reading and memorization before you even are able to play the game. So it's not about getting how the game works. It requires a investment of memory in all these things, right? So I think there's a big component of it, which I'm not saying you guys share from that. I'm not saying I share from that or everybody does, but there is a level of an intellectual elitism that Yu-Gi-Oh players have, where it's like our game is smarter than yours. When in reality, it's like, no, you just really like to read.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that was a hot take. Hot
Right.
take. Intellectual. I like that. I like that. You know, fun fact. You know, when I was in high school, I was in. I think this was chemistry class, and then we had to make a like games for little like experiments. And mine was like I wanted to make mine like around Yu-Gi-Oh. So it was like different elements you could summon. It was like based on the periodic table. It's different elements you could summon and you could combine and fuse and summon. And I did overthink it. I should have made it simpler, but I think I was trying to think of the game. And I'm like, and when I'm writing down the rules, I'm like, yeah, these rules are kind of complicated for anyone to learn.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so last question. So what do you think needs to happen? Either needs to happen or is it inevitably going to happen for Konami to make these kind of changes?
It's gotta. I don't know if it would ever get to the point where it happens. That's such a stubborn company that I think that they would let the game die in the West before they ever did something, because it's still so popular in Japan. Now, if they were smart and didn't want to lose half of the globe, I think the first like quick change is a change to the master rule. That's like a quick thing that we can do without rebooting the game, doing anything. Limit the amount of negates per turn. Do something to limit the amount of special summons. That's one thing. I really do think though that the game needs some sort of reboot. And I know that's a loaded word at this point, but there's something that we gotta do to slow this game down. And I don't think that the solution is selling solutions to the problem they've created. I think that that's something that, hey, if we're not married to the idea of not touching the rules, change the master rule of the game. Because like it doesn't, if you come out with new decks now that slow the game down, well, it's still an open and ever evolving format. So why would we buy those cards? We're just gonna go back to using Snake Eye. There's no point. So you do in a way have to, if you want to do that, you have to ban everything that came before, or reboot a parallel format that has an ongoing growing scene to it that doesn't change the rules of the game. That's why I'm so big on, I'd rather do this whole mental gymnastic and a rework polymerization and rework ritual summons than like throwing them into the extra deck, than changing the rules. I think that that's, in my view, very important. It's not that I couldn't adapt or I wouldn't learn. I'm talking about people who haven't been playing the game for years. And those people are often pushed aside as people that, they haven't been around the game for so long, they're not going to come back. Like the Yu-Gi-Oh community likes to act like these people don't exist. And I promise you they exist because they're all over my videos. All these people that are saying, I'm around Yu-Gi-Oh, I love the IP, I watch all the, I watch Farfa, Team APS and all these people. I just don't like the current game. There's nothing there for me, but I would love to come back to the game. There are so many of those people out there. And I think that Master Duel showed that. Why is it that the game got, I think it was 200K consecutive players at one point, and now it's an average of 10K or whatever it is? What is it about the current game that was not able to retain those players at all, even a fraction of them, right? Like, I think that we really got to think about that and stop just calling everybody a Yugi boomer, because most quote-unquote Yugi boomers are kind of like me. They play the current game. They get how the current game works. They just have the opinion that it used to be better.
Yeah. There's definitely some valid points.
Right.
You got any more questions for him?
No, I think that's it.
This is definitely an interesting conversation.
Yeah, a lot of clarification. Yeah, glad.
Yeah, a lot of things we clarified. And this is like next level thinking when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't think everyone. You hear a lot of these complaints about Yu-Gi-Oh, and people do have solutions, but they're very. They've been kind of like similar or, like on the surface, like solutions, right? Like just tip of the iceberg, I think Yu-Gi-Oh does need a huge change now that you've made these points. Cool. How do people find you, Ruse?
They can go to just YouTube at XSaberUruz. The name of the channel is Uruz. The ad is at XSaberUruz, just like the XSaber card is spelled.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you talking with us. Make sure you guys go follow.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Make sure you guys go follow Ruse. And like, comment, subscribe. Go hit the notification bells on his channel. I think it's very interesting stuff. You know, when my brother showed me.
If it means anything, I like your longer videos. I don't mind watching longer vids. Like,
yeah, but you're a Yu-Gi-Oh!
I appreciate that.
So that makes sense. No. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. See you. Deuce.
Take care. Thank you.